both sides. We don't believe the blame should be equally shared between Republicans and Democrats. The Republican Party has been far more aggressive in employing new tactics and escalating old ones to fight the nominees of a president of the opposing party. The Republican Party has been far more aggressive in their selection of judicial candidates, picking judges who have an ideology closer to the conservative extremes of American politics, while Democrats have tended to select candidates closer to the center. Keep this in mind. The last time a Republican-controlled Senate confirmed the Supreme Court nomination of a Democratic president was 1895. Let me repeat that amazing fact. The last time a Republican-controlled Senate confirmed the Supreme Court nomination of a Democratic president was 1895. So, Mr. President, we can argue endlessly about where and with whom this all started. Was it the Bork nomination, which received a vote in the Democratic Senate, by the way? Or was it the obstruction of judges under President Clinton? Was it when Democrats blocked a few judges under President Bush? Or when Republicans forced Democrats to file more cloture petitions in 5 years of President Obama's presidency than during all other presidencies combined? Was it Judge Garland or Judge Gorsuch? Wherever we place the starting point of this long twilight battle over the judiciary, we're now approaching its end point. We are nearing the final hour, and the stakes are considerable. After the cloture vote on Judge Gorsuch, Democrats will have been denied Merrick Garland due to tactics we felt were unfair, and Republicans will have been denied Judge Gorsuch because of tactics they think are unfair. Our two parties have traded bitter blows. In the tortured history of the Scalia vacancy, the debate has been saturated with contradictions, but in a very real sense, even though each side thinks their side is more right than the other, neither side is happy with how we got here. And now we are standing on the brink of an irrevocable change to the way this body conducts business. As the majority leader once said, changing the rules is a bell that's very hard to unring. As the clock ticks steadily towards tomorrow, what are we going to do? I, for one, would like to see us step back from the brink. As a Democratic leader, I still hope I can sit down with the Republican leader and find a way out of this pernicious cycle. I believe that, as leaders of our respective caucuses, it is at least up to us to try, for the sake of the Senate. The Republican leader and I disagree on a great many things, but we agree upon the importance of the Senate in American life. We can decide today to commit to solving this problem. Each side can stop pointing fingers. Each side can lay down their arms. Each side can put aside the resentments built up after years of trench warfare on nominees. We can decide today to talk about a way out of this impasse instead of changing the rules. We've both lost Supreme Court nominees. We shouldn't also lose a long-standing rule of the Senate that encourages our two parties to work together to fulfill one of the Senate's most important functions. So the option to sit down with us Democrats and talk about a new nominee that can gain sufficient bipartisan support remains on the table right now. I hope my friend, the Republican leader, thinks about where we're headed and takes a moment to let reason and prudence prevail over rancor and haste. Just as the majority leader holds the power to exercise the nuclear option, he also has the power to avoid it. If the majority leader is willing to cooperate in a bipartisan way, if he's willing to sit down with us in good faith and try to find a way out, he will find an open door and an open mind. And maybe we can, for the moment, avoid an outcome that no senator from either side wants to see. I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
Senator from Ohio.
I ask unanimous consent for 3 minutes, 1 minute for Senator Donnelly, 1 for Senator Casey and me. I thank Senator Boozman to talk just for 3 minutes on the mine workers and the health care law.
Is there objection? Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today on the 7th anniversary of the tragedy of the Upper Big Branch mine in West Virginia, where 29 mine workers were killed. There's no better day to ask this Senate to do the right thing on extending health care for mine workers permanently. We've seen far too many times where mine workers in Ohio and West Virginia and Kentucky and all over this country get a letter in the mail, the retired mine workers or their widows getting a letter in the mail saying their health care is about to be canceled. And we then kick the can down the road for 2 or 3 or 4 months at a time. That's unacceptable. It's up to this Senate this month to make sure that we fix this once and for all so that mine workers who did so much for their communities and their families and their country can be assured that they have health care for the rest of their lives, as President Truman promised.
Senator from Pennsylvania.
Mr. President, I just want to add to the remarks of Senator Brown. We had a process, the presiding officer was part of this as well, in the Finance Committee, getting the Miners Protection Act through the Finance Committee 18-8, should have been voted on by the end of the year so these miners could have certainty with regard to health care and pensions, and our government could keep our promise to those miners. Our government has not kept its promise to coal miners, and some of them are here today in Washington. It's about time our government kept our promise. They kept their promise to their company, to their country, and every promise that they've been asked to keep. It's time that we did our job here in the Senate, get this legislation passed in the month of April.
Mr. President.
Senator from Indiana.
Thank you, Mr. President. For the 3rd time in the last year, I stand on the Senate floor in support of thousands of retired coal miners and their families across Indiana and the United States. If Congress doesn't act, many of the miners will lose their health benefits at the end of this month. There are a lot of important issues facing us here, but few have such high stakes. Retirees are already receiving letters telling them that their medical insurance will soon run out. This is a promise that was made and a promise we have to keep. We have less than 30 days. Let's do the right thing. Let's do the right thing and enact a permanent solution. I strongly urge my colleagues to take action immediately and ensure that our retired miners receive the health benefits that were promised to them by the United States government. I yield back, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Senator from Arkansas.
I have 7 requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have been approved by the majority and minority leaders.
So, duly noted.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the Senate is at a crossroads. Senate Democrats, at the behest of outside far-left activist groups, are leading the charge to break nearly a 230-year-old precedent of confirming Supreme Court nominees by a simple majority vote. Why? Well, when you go down the list, there's only one reason. That reason is not based on substance or reality. It's purely partisan. Judge Gorsuch is eminently qualified. That does not seem to be in dispute. His credentials are exceptional. His resume is impressive. His judicial demeanor, professional competence, and integrity all exceed what you expect in a nominee for the highest court in the land. Judge Gorsuch checks every box, so much so that the American Bar Association gave Judge Gorsuch its highest rating. The ABA's assessment, mind you, has been referred to by the minority leader as the gold standard when it comes to evaluating a nominee's fitness to serve on the court. Senate Democrats must be concerned about Judge Gorsuch's past then. Again, that is not the case. No one was able to dig up anything remotely resembling a scandal in Judge Gorsuch's past during this process. You can't manufacture a controversy where none exists. Nothing about Judge Gorsuch has come to light during this confirmation process that could conceivably merit blocking a vote on the nominee. I've heard Senate Democrats try and argue that Judge Gorsuch is out of the mainstream. That hasn't stuck either. This is a judge that has been with the majority of the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals 99% of the time. 97% of his decisions were unanimous. Judge Gorsuch is about as mainstream as you're going to find. Editorial boards from newspapers across the country, including the USA Today, have written in support of his nomination. Does anyone honestly believe that USA Today, which is far from a conservative newspaper, would support confirming Judge Gorsuch for the Supreme Court if he was out of the mainstream? So now Senate Democrats are seemingly creating new standards out of thin air to justify this blatantly partisan act. According to their talking points, a nominee is now expected to tell the Senate and the American people exactly how he or she would rule on matters that may come before the court, especially in instances where the activist base has a very keen interest. As the Judiciary Chairman rightly pointed out, the standard set by Justice Ginsburg in her confirmation hearings, that it would be inappropriate for a nominee to offer hints or make commitments on matters that may come before the court, has been adhered to ever since. This leaves Senate Democrats with a filibuster that lacks a reason. The minority leader has suggested the Senate abandon Judge Gorsuch's nomination if cloture is not agreed to, and ask the president to submit a new nominee. This demand rings hollow. Here's the truth. If this nominee cannot get the Senate Democrats' blessings for a vote, then no nominee put forth by the president can. Again, we are talking about a nominee who has climbed to the top rung of his profession. Judge Gorsuch is well qualified and well within the mainstream. He was unanimously confirmed to the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, and as I mentioned earlier, received the highest possible rating after an exhaustive evaluation from the American Bar Association. Senate Democrats failed to create outrage and controversy over Judge Gorsuch's nomination because there is simply none to be found. But that didn't stop them. It's an amazing 180 turnaround. Senate Democrats who just last year pushed for an immediate vote at the height of a contentious presidential election now appears to be fine with leaving that seat vacant literally for years. Just last year, the minority leader sounded the alarm about the judicial chaos a deadlocked court could lead to. He appears to be no longer concerned about that. By this logic, a vacant seat on the Supreme Court for a few months would be a devastating blow for democracy, but one left open for years is wholly acceptable. This makes absolutely no sense. The only explanation for it is that Senate Democrats expected to be voting on a nominee put forth by a Democratic administration, not one put forth by President Trump. Judge Gorsuch will be confirmed to the Supreme Court this week. It is unfortunate that we may have to break long-standing precedent to do so, but Senate Democrats' actions are to blame for that. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
The senator from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, we've heard famously that elections have consequences. And over the next few days, we will have an experiment in what I call, Mr. President, the physics of politics. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. And Mr. President, if the Democrats use for the first time, a partisan filibuster of a Supreme Court nominee, we will have an equal and opposite reaction. An unprecedented action is going to evoke an unprecedented reaction. Neil Gorsuch deserves to be confirmed and I want to share for the next few minutes why. Mr. President, for more than 2 months since the nomination was first announced, we've seen that Judge Neil Gorsuch, he possesses the qualifications and the temperament to serve as our next Supreme Court justice. While all nominations carry enormous responsibility, this is arguably the most important position we are tasked with filling. We need someone who is extraordinarily qualified, someone who will respect the foundation of our country, someone who has the mental resilience to stay above the political fray. Some of my friends on the left have called Judge Gorsuch unqualified, too conservative, and someone who is simply not in the judicial mainstream. Judge Gorsuch started his legal career by earning degrees from not one but 2 Ivy League schools: Columbia University for his undergrad, Harvard Law for his Juris Doctor, graduating cum laude. He even, as a Marshall Scholar, earned a doctorate degree from Oxford. When one takes into account these extraordinary educational achievements, it would be simply incomprehensible how anyone would consider him unqualified. His record on the bench is just as impressive. And we've heard these numbers so many times that we sometimes just gloss over or glaze over these numbers, but these numbers are powerful indicators of how successful he has been as a judge. Out of nearly 2,700 cases, Judge Gorsuch has been overruled only twice. 98% of his opinions were unanimous, further proving that he falls exactly square in the judicial mainstream. He has received well qualified, as my senator from Arkansas just stated a few minutes ago, from the American Bar Association, the highest rating available for a Supreme Court justice. Judge Gorsuch is also not new to the nomination process. Just a few years ago, in 2006, Judge Gorsuch was unanimously confirmed by the U.S. Senate to the 10th U.S. Circuit. Now, let me say that one more time, because so seldom do we see the Senate acting in a unanimous fashion. So this perhaps is a moment of reflection that Judge Gorsuch in just 2006 received a unanimous vote for the 10th Circuit. Every single Democrat serving in the Senate at that time voted in support of Neil Gorsuch, including 12 members who are still serving in this chamber today. His bipartisan support has not stopped there. Senator Bennett from Colorado says that Judge Gorsuch represents the best qualities of Colorado and that we need to fulfill our responsibility to this nominee. Senator Donnelly from Indiana has said, "I believe he is a qualified jurist who will base his decisions on his understanding of the law and is well respected among his peers. From West Virginia, Senator Manchin acknowledges that while he may not agree with future decisions made by Judge Gorsuch, he also said without question, let me quote, "He has not found any reason why this jurist should not be a Supreme Court justice." Senator Heitkamp from the Dakotas said that during her meeting with our Supreme Court nominee, Judge Gorsuch reinforced the importance of a judiciary that remains independent from the executive and the legislative branches of government. Neil Katyal, former acting Solicitor General under President Obama, said of Gorsuch that he is a first-rate intellect and a fair and decent man. The judge's work reflects his dedication to the rule of law. Last month, throughout his 3-day confirmation hearing, Judge Gorsuch provided detailed and thoughtful responses that should have answered every concern from committee members. As I watched, I was incredibly impressed with his depth of knowledge, his genuine demeanor, and his obvious respect for the rule of law. He understands that his job is not to make the law. Let me repeat that because this seems to be an unusual experience, at least it has been for me, to hear a judge understand and appreciate that his job is not to make the law. His job is not to alter the law. But he expressed time and time again that he is committed to interpreting the law as it is written. One of his most memorable comments from his hearing has left a lasting impression on me, and I hope it does you as well. He said, "A judge who likes every result he reaches is very likely a bad judge, reaching for results he prefers rather than those the law compels." In one sentence, Judge Gorsuch eloquently summarized what we should expect from our Supreme Court judges, and also gives insight into how he intends to serve once confirmed. After his extensive and exhaustive hearing, we can clearly see beyond the shadow of a doubt that this man is more than qualified for appointment. Any argument to the contrary is based purely on political opposition. Today, the Senate stands on the verge of breaking historical precedents. We have let political disagreements get in the way of a judicial seat, a nomination that should stand far above political rancor. A year ago, Judge Gorsuch was serving on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit. He had no idea that he would find himself in the midst of a partisan battle. There is no question this man has led an exemplary life and deserves a fair vote. We are simply asking for a fair vote. A vote. Let us move past these political games and confirm a man who has earned this position with nearly a flawless record as one of the brightest judicial minds our country has to offer. Mr. President, I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.